All righty. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Doris Rodriguez, and we'll get started in a few minutes while we give people a few moments to get situated. So if you need to get anything, please do so now. We'll start in a couple of minutes. I also want to assure to announce that this presentation is available with automatic closed captioning. Additionally, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish this morning, for which I will now provide instructions for our Spanish-speaking attendees. Hoy siempre brindamos servicios de interpretación simultánea para nuestros eventos, igual en persona o en Zoom. Favor de hacer clic en el globo al fondo de su pantalla donde dice interpretación. Luego haga clic en el idioma que desea escuchar, en este caso, español. Si quiere escuchar solo al intérprete, puede también hacerle clic en el Mute Original Audio, que silenciará el audio original. Muchísimas gracias y de nuevo bienvenido a Sinergia. Estamos agradecidos en tenerlos aquí. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we'll be broadcasting live on Facebook. If you can just give me a few moments to connect. Awesome. Okay, good. Awesome. So I want to give a welcome to those that are joining us via Facebook. Just a few housekeeping notes. Everyone who registered via Zoom will receive a copy of the presentation slides via follow-up email within the next few days. A survey will be shared in the end of the chat for Q&A code and a QR code will be shared at your screen at the end of the presentation. We will have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So we encourage questions at any time. However, please remember this is a public forum and we are being broadcasted on Facebook. My name is Doris Rodriguez and I'm the Autism Initiative Coordinator here at Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center. A few words about Synergia's Autism Initiative. The Autism Initiative project is funded by a grant from the New York City Council under its Autism Initiative. This project supplements the work of Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center by bringing increased awareness to New York City's residents, particularly to the communities with large Spanish-speaking populations, about the growing number of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. A strong outreach components targets families of children with suspected or known diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder who are not receiving appropriate educational, health, and other related services. The initiative will link them to other services and supports that meets the individual needs of children and their families. I want to thank you all for joining us. We're glad that you chose to be with us today. Before we get into it, I would like to introduce our presenters today. I want to welcome Ms. Sarah Catalinotto, founder of Parents to Improve Student Transportation, and Ms. Rima Izquierdo, the trainer and developer here at the Metropolitan Parent Center at Synergia. So glad you can join us today.
Good morning.
Alrighty, so I'll hand it over to you guys. Thank you again.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. And 1 second. All right, so good morning. Today we're going to be discussing student transportation. Where's my bus? So we just discussed the housekeeping notes, so we won't go over that again. Although I do want to mention for Zoom, please use the Q&A function to put questions throughout the presentation. It is a long presentation, so there are small sections built in where we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll move on. And also, please watch out for the survey link, which will be shared in the chat as well as on the screen as a QR code at the end of the presentation. So today we're going to discuss the following. What is student transportation? How does it work? What is the eligibility and exceptions, as well as what accommodations are available? who provides student transportation, and then we'll discuss a little bit about rideshare reimbursement, and of course, who can help with student transportation issues. So we discussed Synergia. We've been here for almost 50 years, servicing the community, primarily the underserved and bilingual Spanish-speaking community. And the Metropolitan Parent Center has been around since 1995. We are one of 3 of the parent centers in New York City and are federally funded. And we also have our autism initiative. And while Doris did explain this, I do want to mention that enrollment for our programs is now open. So our integrated transition and our Spanish speaking support group, as well as our Apple Academy. Okay, so let's get to it. How much do you know? If everybody wouldn't mind, if you can just put in the Q&A or in the chat on Facebook, how much you feel you know about student transportation. So you know a lot, a little bit, enough, and we'll watch out for that, and then we'll go through that in a bit. So what is student transportation? So the the legal definition, right, is that it's a service provided, and as per the Chancellor's Regulations 801, the Department of Education, now known as New York City Public Schools, must provide eligible students in public, charter, and non-public schools transportation to get to and from school. And this is in partnership with the MTA as well as our bus companies. Sarah, anything else about just what is student transportation?
Well, it's an educational right under state law, and it's a disability right under federal law. So we are not just talking about a favor, we're talking about something that people fought for, and we want it to work properly. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about the law in a bit. So, how does student transportation work? So, in the basic terms, your student will be found eligible, and whatever they're found eligible for will be outlined in your IEP. Then they're going to deliver this. And that may look like showing up to your house and picking your student up from your door, which we call the curb. They're not going to go to your door. They're going to go in the street, and you're going to meet them at the street curb. And they're going to take your child on the bus. They're going to go pick up the rest of the children in that route. And then they're going to go to the school. When they get to the school, they're going to stop in what might be a line if there are several routes, and the student will wait until it's time for the buses to get called, which means that the staff will now be on the clock and they'll be coming out to get the students, or the students will be going into some type of breakfast room. It really depends on the time of arrival and the arrangement that the school has in the building. Sarah?
There are rules about them getting there not too early and of course not too late. So we'll get to resources to help you complain and talk to the appropriate people about those kind of issues. That's all I have.
Thank you. And then student transportation can also look like, and for many of us, may have IEP students, students with disabilities. So that's what it will look like for many of us here. But it could also look like a student receiving a Metro card and taking MTA to school, or it could look like a student taking a route where there's a bus stop and you go to the bus stop, and then the bus picks up students on different stops throughout and then takes all the students to the school. Methods of transportation. So as mentioned, we discussed different ways it could look. This is the actual what it's called. So there are Metro cards, which will be Omni cards soon, and these would be distributed by the school. So they may look different. In the past, they are they're white with green writing, or they're white with orange writing, or red writing, and that kind of tells you where your kid goes to school, whether it's like elementary or if it's high school or if it's a non-public, but there are different cards for different groups of students. And that gets them access to MTA and non-express, MTA subways and non-express buses. They have made an arrangement with the ferry for like a reduced fare, but that is not included in student Metro cards. And then families in temporary housing are eligible for Metro cards if the parent is taking. So the parent is eligible for a Metro card as well as the student. And just want to be clear about that, because if it's not in temporary housing, the parent does not get a Metro card, only the student. And the parent has to get their way onto the MTA to take their student to school. And then there's stop to school busing and curb to school busing. So stop to school is where there's a stop and you go from your home to this stop in the community somewhere, and then they pick up students, and it may be a few students that are going to this stop, and they'll pick up all those students and take them to school after they complete all of the stops. Very similar to the way the MTA buses work, just a school bus. And then there's curb to school busing, which we mentioned before. Again, this all is based on eligibility, which we will discuss in detail. And this is from the nearest, safest curb to their home. So this could be picking up the student at the corner of their house because in front is not somewhere that they can be picked up. And it may mean that the students don't get off in the front of the school, they get off at like a side exit because it's safer, and they've deemed that that exit will then be the busing exit. So just want to be clear about curb to school, because previously it was called door to door, but it's not actually door to door. But just want everyone to know, in case you hear those terms, this is what we're discussing. Sarah?
Somebody actually asked if it's door to door. We think of it as door to door, but they gave themselves wiggle room to not come necessarily to your door. So it's the curb, meaning the edge of the sidewalk. That's all.
Okay. Coming soon. So Omni cards. The student Metro cards will now be student Omni cards. Not now, soon. And this will replace the Metro card. So everything that the Metro card is now, the student Omni card will be. So just, and again, the student Omni cards, like the Metro cards, are going to be different from the regular Omni cards. So they will be identifiable as student cards. It says that it provides four free trips. Previously it was 3, so that's great. And again, if you want more information, when we send out the slides, you can click the links. All the links in the presentation are live. Types of school bus service. So we mentioned the stop to school, and again, you could be picking up more than one student, definitely dropping off more than one. And this is based on distance, grade, and doesn't have any medical exemptions, any IEP. That's just general bus service, again, based on eligibility for distance and grade. And then curb to school, which we mentioned was previously known as door to door. Utilizes vehicles that are equipped to meet transportation accommodations. And these are listed on the student's individualized education plan, the IEP, or the 504 accommodations plan, and have a trained driver and an attendant or matron on board. Attendant and matron are used interchangeably. Just want to be very clear. And again, you can look up the eligibility for the start to school and curb to school at the link at the bottom, but we're going to discuss it in great detail. All right, so Sarah, we're going to let you take the next couple of slides on eligibility in general.
All right, yes. And people were just asking about that Omni. Are the kids with disabilities and IEP busing going to get it? So that's a very important question, and no promises have been made. So please stay ready to fight and petition about that matter. In general, if you don't have an IEP or a 504, the only busing you would get is that stop to school. And if you live too close to the school, as it says here, less than half a mile, they will say, no, just walk or figure it out. If you live between half a mile and a mile, you can if you're very young, get the school bus, but they've made this now that third grade up are only going to get the Metro card. Finally, if you're above a mile, less than a mile and a half, there are options from grades K to 6. 7 to 12 get the Metro card only, except in certain very specific districts of Queens and Staten Island that used to have 7th and 8th grade busing because they have no sidewalks or the streets are dangerous. Lastly, anybody who lives a mile and a half or more away from the school, again, K through 6, can be registered for the school bus through the process with the school arranging for these stops. They may have to share this bus with other schools in the building or in a different building, but 7 to 12, generally speaking, are going to be expected to ride to school alone unless a parent goes with them, and that parent has to pay unless they are in temporary housing, including being doubled up. We do have resources about some of this, and I'm seeing a question about how you find out, and we'll get to more about that later, but your first place for this and that is the school. Someone at the school needs to be able to help you.
I do
That
want to make a note on the distance. You can live too far. So I know that this is not, so I want to say up front that we intentionally copied a lot from the website because we wanted to decode it for you, because there's what's on the website and then there's practically what's happening day to day for families. So while this is what it says, um, there's no disclaimer that if you live out of district, you're not eligible. So if your student goes to school in a district that is not your home district, that is not the district you live in, they may not be eligible for certain accommodations even if it's listed for their grade band, right? So like school bus or Metro card for grades 3 to 6, for grades K to 6. If you live out of district, you will only be eligible for the Metro card. So I just want to mention that.
same thing with gifted and talented. It's not guaranteed, even though in some interpretations of the law it should. Okay, I'm ready for next if people are.
So I do see a hand. I just want to mention we're going to be taking all of the questions from the Q&A. So if you could please put your question in the Q&A, but we are checking and answering as we go. And you can take the slide, Sarah, and I'll look at the questions and
Oh, okay.
don't worry, I got it.
Right, all right. So the things that they determine are, as you saw, the grade level, the distance between home and school that you would have to walk, and then accommodations, and there can be stop school busing or curb to school on a 504. Curb to school is the IEP or 504. We'll get into that more, how you do that, what the forms look like. And when a child is in temporary housing or foster from K through 6, they can request busing in order to stay at the school where they began, even as they are moving where they reside. And it's gonna be pretty much whatever is available. So it might be a stop, it might be a curb. Usually they would plan, in the case of a shelter, to put the stop right close to the shelter because several children will be boarding at that point. Next, I guess.
I also want to mention, I'm not sure if you said it, that they're eligible to stay
Okay.
for that rest of that year and the next year if it's their last year.
If they do get permanent housing, that's right, this is extended. So yes, we have to do a lot to make sure this is enforced. Because it takes time for that bus then to change. But this was something, again, that people fought for, and our advocates are monitoring how that goes. So you have the right. All right, so we have broken down the main types of transportation where you have to prove it with doctor information filled out, signed, and submitted, and in most cases, having some kind of meeting to finalize that. The first is the IEP that can recommend transportation door to door with the second person who comes on and off, supports your child with some first aid training in theory, and on the IEP, if the child needs anything special, we'll go into that medically. It's still going to be the same paperwork and process. In red, the 504 accommodations plan. There's a lot of different paperwork. The Office of Pupil Transportation, which is part of the Department of Ed. We'll talk more about that. They have to approve these items here. Lastly is a medical exception. So if your child could have taken the subway, whatever, but they break a leg, God forbid, or have surgery, they might only need the curb to school with the support for a short time, and that's considered a medical exception, and that's some similar forms, and that's what I had to say about that slide.
Okay, so what is an IEP? The IEP is an acronym for Individualized Education Program, and this is the set of services, the set of everything, right? It's the whole plan built out, blueprint for special education and related services for student under IDEA, and the scope of activities and settings it covers. So it's going to tell you school, class size, bus size, amount of time the bus has to get there. Does the bus need an AC? Do you need a car seat? The IEP mandates a specific set of supports, activities, and services. And again, I just mentioned some that are really specific to transportation, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And a federal law, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, sometimes they call it IDEA, ensures a student's IEP is carried out as written. This is the responsibility of the student's school. So even though busing is presented as separate, it is not separate. It is a separate service, a related service on the IEP that the school still has a responsibility to ensure is facilitated. So we will talk about that more in a moment. Who approves student transportation? So this is kind of the breakdown of, from top to bottom of what the process is. So New York City Public Schools is the New York City Department of Education, same name, just rebranded. And they are the custodian responsible to provide this service. So IDEA, federal government, right? Federal law says you have to do this. New York City Public Schools is the entity that has the responsibility to get that done in New York City for all students, pending eligibility. Then there is the Office of Pupil Transportation. I know that we tend to hear of it spoken of as some separate, different entity from New York City Public Schools. It's not. It's the office of. Therefore, it is an office within New York City Public Schools in a department. So it is absolutely 100% the same people. It's just its own office. And they really, and we're going to call them OPT for the rest of this presentation, but just know OPT is Office of People Transportation. They are the ones who approve transportation generally. So they determine eligibility. Now, if there is some other eligibility that needs to be determined, or if eligibility is based on a medical condition, then the Office of School Health, which again is not a separate entity, it is another office under New York City Public Schools or Department of Education, DOE, however you call them. This is another office under them. So the answer is New York City Public Schools approves transportation. The detailed answer is that the Office of People Transportation, it approves the general eligibility for the greater chunk of students, and then the Office of School Health is when it gets medical. Who's who? Who provides what? So New York City Public Schools, as we mentioned, is the larger umbrella. They are the biggest school agency within New York City. And they are they're the parent company, right? And then there's all these offices that fall underneath their purview. So as we mentioned, Office of People Transportation. Now that's the office that's in charge of transportation in general for New York City. Within that, you know what? Sarah, you take the top and I'll take the bottom.
Right, that was the plan. Okay, I'm not muted, am I? Okay, yes, people who had their kids on the bus a long time ago, we were able to know who was the director for Brooklyn, Queens, etc. That is more hidden and internal now, but there are routers who work out and adjust which student belongs on which route. Um, you mainly have these regional liaisons. Your school, every school, even if it is private, they're in a geographic district of the New York City Public Schools, and you know, 2 or 3 districts combined are a region, which are covered by one liaison at OPT. Then we have the Office of School Health. That's a doctor reviewing documents that we mentioned. I will say that be clear that when you call the OPT hotline, you are not connected with directors, routers, and liaisons who will actually correct your issue in the moment. You just have someone who's trained to take your name, give you a complaint number, incident ticket, and sometimes you have to do other things to lift it up to the level of people who can make a real change. I can stop there.
All right, so school staff. So schools have a transportation coordinator, and it might be a different name, but there is somebody that coordinates transportation at the school level, and they may have another job, right? They may be the assistant principal, they may be the parent coordinator, they might be, they are definitely going to be something else, and the transportation coordinators, I just want you to be aware of that, to please give them grace, because the messaging is always to contact the school, but in many cases, there is little that the school can do to support, other than escalate the concerns. And we'll get into those specifics in a moment. And then there's the student transportation paraprofessional, which you may hear referred to as an STP. And that person, if a student has the accommodation to have a one-to-one para on the bus, paraprofessional, we'll use the term para going forward in the presentation, the school provides the para. So this person would be somebody that works at the school. Now, there is an exception to this. In recent years, we have suffered systemically staff shortages. And one of the biggest areas hit in transportation is the transportation para. And so New York City passed a contract allowing for schools to subcontract with an agency to provide a para in the event that they cannot get the position filled with New York City public school staff. So I just want to mention that they won't technically be school staff, but they will be assigned by the school and to the school for your student, but they will actually work for an agency. And that situation, so somebody asked in the chat about what happens if they're not giving the accommodations. We'll talk about that, but just in regards to the para, if you don't have a para when school starts, they can get you an agency para, but they have to wait at least a week because of the union. And I won't go into detail about that. I just want you to understand that if they don't offer you this the first week of school, there's the reason they can't. Bus company, also known as the vendors, they'll have an owner or owners, right? So there'll be like a big boss, and then there'll be a manager, which will typically be a person on the base that's in charge of day to day. And then each base has dispatch. And so you could have a vendor that has a bus company in the Bronx and in Queens and in Brooklyn. So they'll have their each dispatch, and those dispatchers will be in charge of the routes that come from to and from that base. So you may see a phone number on your New York City Schools account for a bus company, and then you call them and they're like, oh, this is not the right number. This happens sometimes when one company has multiple bases. And then on the bus, you'll have the driver and the matron. The driver and the matron, well, if you have curb to school bus, then you'll have a matron. If you have stop to school, you will not have a matron. I just want to be clear. And matron is also attendant. They We're going to talk about their roles in a second. I'm going to let you go in a little bit about their roles, but I just want to be clear about like the driver and the matron and like what they can and can't do. Sometimes people want to on a personal phone call, or so we just want to set expectations, but we'll finish the slide first. Personnel and staff, school versus bus and bus versus company. So again, the school is going to have the paraprofessionals, but the bus company is going to provide the matron or attendant and the driver. And the school may also provide a nurse, which may not work from the school, but it'll be assigned from the school, similar to the agency. And then bus versus company. So the bus staff and the company are also slightly different. And I'm gonna let you go into the specifics about that difference, Sarah.
The difference on this slide of
The bus versus the company.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yes, what we don't have is a system where all the buses fleet is owned by the Department of Education. They are private companies. Some of them are owned by, financial institutions in another country. The company receives the routes. They don't they don't usually automatically check to make sure the route makes sense, but the people on the bus have a way to make a report to their company, and if they have the union, to their union rep, if the route is in serious violation or unsafe in some way. When you're calling, you're probably talking to dispatch, as Rima said, and when you are working with the people who are on the bus, it's going to be, they're going to be in a rush to get all the other kids, but we can approach it with grace that they are parents and they have the best interests of the child. We usually try to, get to know them. They don't have to give you their phone number. A lot of people do that as a courtesy and to have direct communication in case you are running late or they are running late. But you can't sort of demand that.
I'm
That
glad you said that because
Mhm.
there's a question in the chat that says that the bus driver is supposed to call the family 5 minutes before the student gets picked up.
Mhm.
And then it says, is the matron supposed to do it all the time?
Mhm. Right. So that has not been built in. There's only one company we know that um, distributes a phone to each bus for that to happen. But there's a tracker that they're supposed to have added so that this will happen automatically. This would be good, and it's sort of exists, but that's going to be really another training, I think, to how to really understand that and make it work. So what we fight for is that the routes would be stable enough and consistent enough so that it's going to come between these 10 minutes and you come 10 minutes early, but you don't have to come half an hour early and still wait an hour and wonder where's my bus. A lot of it goes back to the way that the workforce is kind of taken for granted and not recruited and held on to unless they threaten to strike or, we as parents raise a lot of noise as we have done in Parents to Improve School Transportation and other councils that will, be available to you for support one-to-one, but also for the system to be more efficient. And that's the long-term goal. But it is our civil right, always at the back of the mind. Um, it's the law. They have to get your kids to school on time and safely, ready to learn. I went
Thank
beyond the
you.
question. I
No,
apologize.
you're fine. We needed that. We needed that. And you just made me think of one thing that they only have to wait 1 minute. 1 minute. It used to be three. I don't know when. I don't know when they changed it. It's 1 minute. They only have to wait for you 1 minute and they can leave. And they don't have to call you and they don't have to honk. I think it's actually illegal to honk. Yeah. So I just want to let everybody know that and give the grace when they do all the extra that they're not supposed to. All right, next slide. I think it's questions. Yep. All right, so let's pause. We're gonna check for some questions.
I'd like to take the question about the person who doesn't have their NYCA set up
Okay.
and will they be called? So the school has received the information or should have received the information this week. They are supposed to inform you. You may have to take the first step and reach out and ask the school for the route info. The bus drivers will do dry runs, as they call it, going door to door, but without the actual children to get a sense of their timing. And they may call you this Friday or next week, Wednesday. So if you see an unknown caller just this Friday and just next Wednesday, or maybe with some extra wiggle room towards even Labor Day weekend, um, just this once, I would answer my phone because it might be, hi, this is Joe. I'm your driver. It's route number thus and such. And please be downstairs on Thursday at such and such a time. I hope that answers the question that was from NI.
Okay, thank you. What would be the OPT number to call? That's gonna come up later. For drop-off after school, do they let the child off the stop if there is no person at the stop to receive the child, second grade? That's a good question. It says so there's a card that they give out every year. It used to come in a yellow envelope, but now the bus staff are responsible to distribute it the first day of school when they pick up the student. And on that card at the bottom, there's a box that you check or don't check that says that the student may be dropped off unattended. And so that where you indicate that is going to determine whether that student is allowed to get off that bus alone or not. I do want to say that I definitely got my phone call at 8:01 this morning for my bus. I just want to let everyone know. So they're making the phone calls, the bus routes are up, and you gotta pick up. So please for the next few days just pick up the random calls and the blocked numbers and just hang up on the ones that you don't need. Let me see if there's another question we can take really quick.
I'm putting in the chat the information with a couple of links that we mailed to our members of PIST this week,
Got it.
which repeats what we said. And there's a link to, oh wait, no, it's the second half. Sorry. Now I have to give you another one, which will have a link to what that emergency contact card looks like. In fact,
That's fine. Because we're gonna send a follow-up email, so you
okay.
can give us the extra chat links that you're sending, and then
Okay.
we'll send that to all the attendees in the follow-up email. If you're watching on Facebook, you might still be able to register and jump on, and then you can get access to the links as well. All right, so we're gonna go from questions. I'll clean up the questions later. We're gonna move on because super information. And there are a couple of questions in the chat that will be answered in the presentation. There was one about PM afternoon drop-off. All right, so specialized transportation. So specialized transportation is just door to door or curb to school, and it's for students with disabilities and some other special situations. Again, transportation is a related service. If it's on the IEP, again, make sure that it's on the IEP. Every meeting that you finish, when you read the IEP, as you should, the final copy, you're going to jump to the transportation section and make sure that everything there is exactly as you discussed in the meeting, including if you said any comments, make sure they're reflected. You are guaranteed to have your medical and other equipment necessary safely secured on the bus. Your student, should be properly secured in their seat with a functioning seat belt. And if they need another mobility device, whether it's a car seat or a safety vest, or if they need to have their wheelchair secured, that bus must be equipped to provide that. And please make sure that if your student needs this, that it says it on the IEP, any of it, including the chair, because it is not something that's guaranteed. And if it's not written, it's not real. They don't have to actually provide it. Drivers and attendants, again, matrons, should have specialized training on transporting students with disabilities. There's some other training involved as well, but again, they are trained. And there should be a consistent and on-time pickup schedule with telephone communication from the bus company. Remember, if significant delay is expected, significant delay they define as 15 minutes. So if they're going to be 15 minutes early or 15 minutes late, then they're supposed to call you. It's not written anywhere, but that's OPT's. That's what we are told as advocates, and I am sharing that with you. And again, the bus company. So it's not going to be the matron or the driver that is obligated to call you. They might, but they're not obligated to do so. The bus company is. So if they're going to pick up your child late, the bus company is obligated to call. Now, I want to be clear, just because they've given themselves a 15-minute grace period, you have the right to call and file a complaint for late pickup after 1 minute. So I just want to be clear about your rights, particularly if it's a problem route or if the schedule is really affecting the student. An advance notification when transportation eligibility is projected to change. So sometimes when you change grades, it changes. Sometimes, again, when you change the IEP, it changes. So any changes that are that they know are going to happen, they need to let you know in advance. Eligibility, so IEP mandated. So busing, as we mentioned, is a related service. The federal law, IDEA, guarantees the IEP is delivered the way it is written, including related services. Failure to provide mandated transportation and all associated accommodations is a violation of IDEA. So somebody did ask in the Q&A about what happens if they're not providing the accommodations for transportation. It's a violation, and you can start filing violations. And we'll go into how you file violations a little bit later. So now we're going to go into 504 transportation accommodations. I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, I was answering a question partially.
I'll go into the Q&A now.
Great, okay. So the 504 looks a little different than the IEP, but you still need to get a doctor involved.
Sarah,
And
I want to pause for a second.
Mhm.
Our interpreter asked us to please slow down.
Okay. All right. 504 refers to another disability law, and there are actually 5 pages of forms to fill out, which we will show you shortly. This slide contains the links to the forms. It's 3 in one of them and 2 in the other one. This would be a student who might not have an IEP, but who also has a medical need to have specialized busing that will come closer to their house and will have a trained bus attendant, not only a driver who's watching the street, but another person that we call the attendant who is watching the children and who has supposedly been trained with those how to meet basic needs of the person and keep them safe and healthy. And some people might also request through this kind of form things like a bus nurse, if the child has a feeding tube, etc. We find that students who have diabetes use this form a lot for transportation. And this is when you're either making a 504 plan with the school. So again, there will be a meeting, but it would not be through the exact same combination of staff as the IEP meeting and planning. Does that help? We can move on. Now we're talking about exceptions for people who don't have either the IEP or the 504. If you have an IEP, and you're in temporary housing, you should use the IEP to get your transportation, and you would not have to also apply for a temporary housing exception to get a bus to take you to the school. The same really goes for all of those first 6, if you already have it on the IEP. But the last one is a little closer to the IEP. And again, we will show you the forms, how they look, and how to link to them online. Prima, you gonna go through, flash through these?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on, the Q&A. All right. So eligibility for housing, we included the information, but we're not going to go through it because we're focused on students with disabilities, and students with IEPs that are in temporary housing are going to be eligible for their busing. And again, we included all the information here and the link, so when you receive the slides, you can go through it in detail. Eligibility for foster care, same thing. It's very similar to that of housing. Joint custody. So we're not going to go through everything because, again, we mentioned we're focused on students with disabilities. So we're going to talk about what is relevant to students with IEPs. But again, this is all included for you to go through at the end. And should you need additional support, you can always contact our intake line. So the student already receives curb to school, again, door to door, or specialized transportation as part of their IEP, 504 accommodations plan, or approved medical exemption. So again, a student that has joint custody that has this eligibility criteria would then be eligible for alternate busing arrangements. Same for victim of a crime, but again, these are eligibility for students that don't have a disability or that don't have a mandate of transportation, rather. And just want to clarify, you may have a disability, but you're not classified as disabled in the New York City public schools. So I just want to be clear about what I mean. You can have a disability and not be classified in school. Exception form. So this is a copy, a picture or sample of what it looks like when you go into the website to create a ticket to apply or to request an exception to transportation eligibility. Do you want to elaborate?
Yes.
Yes.
The reason that we highlighted the arrow on the upper right corner is that they have instructions on the site, but you have to notice it and click and read all of that. It's a long form with all of those 6 cases that we breezed through just now. You don't have to fill out all 6, only the one that applies to your student. And we'll talk really again now more about the forms that involve the doctor and releasing consent for the doctor to speak with these agencies that we showed you at the beginning.
Okay. So back to details about eligibility and specifically medical 504. I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Oh, sorry. I was about to get my Q&A on, but all right. So there is a long set of instructions on this link at the website of the schools where they do have instructions, forms, and almost everything is available to select your language from what they call the main 9, New York City languages and in English. So the names of the forms are here. Some of it is filled out by you, some of it is filled out by the doctor. You can decide in both this case and the IEP case to have two different doctors, a primary and a specialist, to, really make the case that there is a medical need for what you're asking for. I think that's all I wanted to say on that the 504 team is based at the school. If there's going to be a whole plan, that's all, that's probably another training, but if you need a starting point to learn about that, or if your school staff needs a starting point, this would be the link to finding it on the DOE website. But again, it's a civil right, it's the law, and it should be done correctly to get your kid whatever they need. Next. Okay. On the exception slide, the last one was medical, but that's not on the same exception form. It's that your student without the IEP or 504 mandate for school busing needs transportation for a short time, such as healing from surgery. So these are links to the online forms that are also printable, and there is a special email to send that in. It's not the same as the others. What is the same is the release form and the request form. You'll see and we'll show you that it's just like you would do for an IEP. So if you know how to do it for your child who has an IEP, then you know how to do it if, God forbid, another child who is general education student temporarily needs a ride to school on a yellow bus. I hope that helps. Next. Okay, so we've broken it down into IEP, 504, the other medical exceptions that I just described, and the non-medical, which is hazard custody housing. Next, we're going to show you what the forms look like aside from the non-medical that you already have seen. Next. So as I just said, A, which is the IEP, and C, which is the temporary medical situation, both involve the medical evaluation request on the left. The doctor needs to make a case for why these conditions the child has medically make it impossible for them to take public transportation with their non-disabled peers. And what kind of things happen? Do they get overstimulated? Do they become aggressive? Do they melt down? Do they, suffer in particular physical ways? This can be anything from a serious medical fragility that makes it unsafe for them to be on a long, bumpy ride, to a condition like autism that makes, the sensory stimulation of a large bus with a lot of students is too much, and they're going to be dysregulated for the rest of the school day. This form on the right hand, you fill out, you can get help. And we'll show you, I think, next how that form looks in Spanish. It is available in multiple languages on the site. Y aquí se encuentra. This is just to show you, right? You could fill it out in Spanish, or you could compare and then do it in English for the system. Okay, and you went a little fast, Rima. I mentioned that the 504 process involves 5 pieces of paper. So as you can see on the left here, The request for accommodations for the parent looks like one thing. On the right, this is what we call for short the HIPAA. Don't ask me to say what all those letters stand for, please. But it's basically saying your doctor can talk to the Board of Ed doctor. Next, I can show you that this is a 3-page form called medical accommodations request form. As you may have seen, if your child even has medication or an asthma pump that needs to stay with the school nurse and you're getting a 504 plan, that's the same form you would use to further explain the reasons why the child needs to have special transportation or special accommodations on their yellow bus. Some of this is written by the parent and some is written by the doctor. Please, with all of this, be careful. Have somebody read it over to make sure you and the doctor have said enough, that it's clear, that the signature is legible. And we just wanted everyone to see that you don't do this for the IEP, you do the other thing, and vice versa. I hope that helps. I can go to the next slide, and it probably is for Rima. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to let everybody know I did go through the Q&A. We have another question session coming up, so we're going to leave the Q&A, and when we go to our questions, we'll go bring that up, just so we can get through the information while we have interpretation. So student transportation and school responsibility. So this is what the school must do. The school must provide transportation information to the family. So when you call OPT, they're going to tell you, we can't provide that information over the phone. If you don't have a New York City Schools account, you have to then go to the school to get your route information. School must ensure all students requiring transportation have routes or alternative means to get to school. So if a school has 30 kids that have IEPs with transportation accommodations, they need to make sure that those 30 kids have buses. If they get routes for 27 kids and you have 3 kids that don't have it, they need to find an alternative for these 3 children to get to school. And we'll talk a little bit about alternatives later. Schools have transportation coordinators. They have to have somebody, and they may not call them that, but there is somebody in charge of transportation that is coordinating. And this person should be the one that communicates with the regional liaison to OPT and can submit complaints. So again, we mentioned earlier that the school can't fix many of these issues. The way that the school supports in fixing these issues is the escalation path, is that they submit the complaints. When they're getting complaints from the school and they're getting complaints from the parent, and it's for multiple kids on the route, those issues tend to get resolved faster than if any one party is individually filing complaints themselves. So I just want to mention that there is that power in numbers, and that relationship with the school is really important because there are certain complaints that only the school can put in. So they may tell you, it really depends on the operator you get, but they may tell you you can't put in the late to school complaint, that the school has to call and do it. So you want to follow up with your school when you realize that your student is late and make sure that they're filing the appropriate complaints, because if there are no complaints, then OPT doesn't know there's a problem with the route, so they're never going to fix it. And staff may be assigned to pick up students from the bus or classroom or accompany them to their designated busing area again. So the bus is going to get to school, and then there'll be somebody grabbing the students off the bus. And the students may then go with their teachers to their classes. They may then go to the cafeteria or breakfast room, again, or designated busing waiting area. But there will be staff once they're off the bus staff are essentially transferring responsibility to another staff in the school. How to add busing and accommodations to the IEP. So Sarah, I'm gonna let you take this one. It's a lot of forms.
I'm happy to take it, but the slide is not appearing right now.
Okay, so while it's loading for you, I'll start. So the HIPAA form that we showed you before, and again, it's in English and Spanish, needs to go to your doctor and then back to the school. And then you have to sign it to give the consent. Then you have to, the child's doctors also, if you're looking for an accommodation, they're gonna sign a medical evaluation request, which used to be called the request for medical transportation accommodations form.
Mhm.
And then you submit those documents and tell the school assessment team what days are best for a meeting. So again, you have to do the documents first, then you have to have the meeting. You have to sign off on that meeting that we agreed to add these accommodations to the IEP or the service, the related service to the IEP. But again, that's a draft. Once it's finalized, OPT is not gonna see any of that until it's actually finalized and signed. And then if there are any medical accommodations, it's an application process. So you're submitting this while you're doing the IEP, but you're not going to be guaranteed to receive them, and you're not going to have a response at the end of that meeting. It's going to go to the Office of School Health, and they're going to, again, because medical transportation accommodations, they're going to determine if the accommodations are approved and if that student is eligible or not. But just want to be clear about, you don't press enter in the IEP and then OPT sees it and you have a route. That everything is a timetable. And when you make adjustments to the transportation, whatever, whether it's the route, accommodation, if they need to change the route, that takes at least 2 weeks. Or if they have to assign a route, that takes at least 2 weeks, which is like 10 school days. We're just gonna say 2 weeks. But it does take some time, so it's not a right now thing. It's not an emergency solution. It's a process. And Sarah?
Yes, I found the slide for myself. I just want to add again that not everyone at the Office of Pupil Transportation has access to read every child's IEP because it's confidential. And so finishing the IEP has to be followed by outreach from the school psychologist team or the transportation coordinator to get this information to their OPT liaison, which is listed on the website, and then have them directed to the right people at the Office of Pupil Transportation. We used to be able to fax it, certain pages. Everything is more digital now, but that doesn't mean it's automatic. The day you leave the meeting, it's not set yet. It's got to be finalized and it's got to be pushed to the proper channels at OPT. So I agree with everything Rima said. Start now, I guess, is the real takeaway, right? If you know your kid needs something, start talking to the doctor. We're going to be bringing you some papers. I might need an appointment. Start talking to the school-based team. We're going to need a reevaluation or a reconvene. They won't do a whole testing of the kid. They'll do a simple reeval meeting to change, because it is considered a more restrictive service. So if your kid has busing, it's like adding speech. It's like adding counseling. You have to go through the motion. It cannot be an annual IEP meeting with just a couple of teachers. They cannot add busing. They cannot make the busing more specialized to the child's needs. I'll stop.
More on transportation accommodations on the IEP. Again, so most students travel to school the same way, but
I'm sorry, Rima, is it possible to share the screen again?
so I am
Oh, it might
sharing.
be me. It's
Yeah,
me.
no, it's yeah. Maybe
Sorry.
turn off your camera and see if that improves the video quality. So transportation accommodations on the IEP, most students with IEPs travel to and from school the same way, right? So whether they're taking the bus, they're walking to school, but some do need more. And so when we have needs that could be emotional, behavioral, cognitive, communicative, or physical or medical in nature, then there are some additional accommodations that can be added. And some of these are medical nursing services, travel time limitations, safety vests, and car seats. And we'll go into a few more in a minute. Families who believe that curb to school busing and the accommodations are necessary for their student should reach out to their school or CSE based IEP team. Again, like Sarah mentioned, the time is now. Everything yesterday. So if you feel like you need it, start reaching out, start writing emails. I know that there are, at least for the next couple of days, there probably won't be people in schools or very limited staff. So you may not get an answer, but have all your emails and documentation ready to go for when school starts. They return Monday. All right, so accommodations. So there's types of vehicles. There could be a standard, which is that larger bus that holds many students. There's mini wagons, which are the mini buses that hold fewer students. And then there's specialized vehicles that are smaller, hold like 1 to 3 students for our individuals with highly specialized needs. There's also environmental and temperature control, and that's AC and heat, right? It's not just the AC in the summertime, but it's the heat in the wintertime. And just a really cool tips and trick that you're only going to hear here is you want to ask for dual temperature control in your IEP meeting, and that will cover you for summer and winter. And then the 2035 is that's the year that a law is going to go into place where the temperature control is supposed to be better. And more on that, and we need advocates and support. So please contact PIST if you're interested. Then there's a one-to-one student transportation para, like we mentioned earlier, is STP, and we've attached a link for resources regarding bus paras from PIST. And then you could, again, we said medical services, you could have a nurse. The seats, right? So seating is also a potential accommodation. We may have students that are larger that need more space. So you can ask for the one, it's called 1+1 as an accommodation. There's also, if you have a para, then it would be 2 seats. So you would see an accommodation for 2 seats if you have a one-to-one para on the IEP. Travel time limitation. It's called limited travel time, and the code is LTT, but like 2 years ago, they changed the list of accommodations. And so they're working from both lists now. And I really can't tell you how that works, but just know that they may give you another name for limited time travel, but it is still an accommodation that you can request. That's all I want to say is it. And again, limited travel time. So there was a question about the time of the routes and if there is a time limit for students with disabilities. The time limit has nothing to do necessarily with the disability unless it's limited travel time. There are general route constraints for time, and that is it's 120 minutes in general for a route. It's 115 minutes if it's out of borough, and for preschool, it's 90 minutes. And that limited travel time can be whatever the student needs, 30, 45, 90, 60, depending. There's fewer students on bus and then wheelchair. Students in temporary housing and foster care. Again, I know that this feels like a repeat, but the first one was about eligibility and the second is about accommodations. And again, the important part here for our families with students with disabilities is that students with busing recommended on their IEP and students in K to 6 in DHS shelters do not need to complete an exceptions form. So that's the main difference that we want you to understand. Alternate PM drop-off. So I'm going to touch on it and then I'll let Sarah go into the details. And I think we have a form for you because everything here is about forms. So some families receiving specialized transportation, again, curb to school or door to door, might need some accommodations if they work or if a student has therapy or goes to after school to get the student to the right place in the afternoon. There may also be that situation of joint custody where we mentioned earlier, where maybe, you know, the weekend or on a certain day the student spends with the other parent, so the busing needs to be going to this other place. So they can request the one-way transportation to a different after-school location. And again, these requests are subject to approval. So it may not be available because there may not be a route available that runs through there. But in general, they do their best to accommodate. The only situation that is not probably going to happen is if it's in a different borough. So if the parent lives and it's the borough that they live in, because I know there are some situations where you may live in one borough and your student goes to school in another. If it's in the borough that the student goes to school in, it's a better chance that it may be approved. But again, that's the only case where different boroughs are likely to be approved. Again, it says other boroughs will not. And then this again takes 10 days, 2 weeks. This is just in general for any changes. So whether you're changing the route, the drop off, the pickup, it's going to take 2 weeks minimum to get that solidified and put into place. And then this is the digital age. So everything is request online, go to this link. So request online, go to this link. Anything else, Sarah? And then I'll let you take the form on the next page too.
We can go to the next one so people see what we're talking about. Of course, it's a little blurry, but this form used to be in paper. It may still exist somewhere in paper, but that same place called the Info Hub, Transportation, I'd like to request the steps for doing this are at the link, the PIST NYC link in blue at the bottom of this slide. And it will lead you to something like this. This was pages 5 and 6, but it's mostly just taking your name and your child's name. However, these places are important because you have to know not only the borough and the address, but you have to figure out what school district is this after-school program located in, or this place that your child is being dropped off, even if it's your aunt's house or their grandmother's house, and they don't go to school there, you still have to do a comparison between the map of the school districts and the map of the city to say, oh, okay, he's going to District 17 after school, because they're going to try to match it up according to existing routes that are going that way. And that's how the route is broken down. So please take your time and read what's at the drop-off, or we're going to move on. Next.
Thank you. I also want to pause. We're going to have a question session interjection coming up. We're going to prioritize Spanish questions because our interpreter will have to leave shortly. So if our Spanish participants can please share your questions and we will prioritize those first. Oh, wow. Okay, so questions. That was a great segue. So I'm going to go to the Q&A quickly, and we have been trying to answer as we go, but again, we're going to try to prioritize getting all the information in. So my son's pickup time is at 6:45. Am I correct to be outside at 6:30? They do want you to be waiting outside 15 minutes in advance in case they come early. En el transporte especializado hay un periodo de tiempo máximo para niños con discapacidad. We just answered that is the time on the route. ¿Cómo hago mi queja por retraso? They would like to know how to file their complaint for delays. That's going to be covered in the presentation. I'm sorry, I started talking fast. Our interpreter. The parent said, the question here is the matron supposed to get out of the bus? Yes, they are supposed to get off the bus. When they open the door, stand there. The student gets on the bus, and then they re-enter the bus after the student. What is limited time travel limit for within the borough? That depends on the student. So the team is going to determine the amount of time that is, and it's going to be different. Again, it's an individualized program, so it's going to be individualized to each student requiring that. Does the bus run the after school program? No, it does not. We have been fighting that for a very long time. First starting at the end of the school after school program, not bringing the student to a different, no, there's no busing for after school. And then I have a parent that asked a specific question. So there was a student that lives down the block from the new school, and they still have busing. You don't have to do the door-to-door service if you don't want to. You can leave it on the IEP and talk to the bus and tell them not to pick you up, which I recommend versus removing it from the IEP, because if anything changes, adding things back on is harder than taking things off, and your eligibility did not change, your situation changed. So I would try to make an agreement with the bus staff, and I would not ask OPT. I would talk to the school and the bus directly and see if there's some agreement that you could come to. All right, so now we're going to move on.
Rima, I just want to say that to the question about limited time travel, it really should be whatever the doctor said, but that's not what they're, generously giving nowadays. They have a new thing on the IEP that they call standard limited time, so 60 in borough, 90 minutes if the bus needs to go to another borough for school. But even without the accommodation of busing, there are some minute limits that we have in a chart. I have put a link in the chat to Spanish and English versions of that chart so that you know if they're going out of borough and they're in such and such a grade and it's taking more than 100 whatever minutes, definitely call, put in a ticket, because they should not take advantage of you being nice just for 5 minutes when they could, work harder at creating routes that are fair and get everybody where they should get, even if there's a little bit of traffic and there's a little bit of rain and whatever. That should have been built into the length of the route. So it really takes everybody complaining about everything for them to understand that they need to prevent these problems, and then our kids won't suffer and they won't get in trouble from the city council or the law. I guess I better stop.
Thank you. And then the last question I'll take is the parents asking, so they're basically saying that the bus doesn't come, does no call, no show sometimes. So we just wanna we're gonna go over escalation paths. So we're gonna answer that later. And I'm gonna take the Spanish question that came in. Si mi niño no tiene problemas de comportamientos, Grace, pero si tiene problemas de comunicar sus necesidades, emociones, pueden aprobarle una para el bus. Tengo cartas de su pediatra, de su basically, they're saying that they would like a para on the bus. There's no trial. You can't try a para on the bus. Either you get one or you don't. You have to apply for it. So there, in the link that we said paras, there's a link to the PIST website, and there's a resource there to help with this. But you can take those letters to request an IEP meeting to have that added, take the letters with you to the meeting and put in the application, and then you have to see if it gets approved.
Espérate. Okay, good. I sent the
Alright, so
link. It has Spanish.
awesome. So now we're gonna move forward.
The 5-point seat.
All right, so look, so where's my bus? School bus delays. So this website takes you to a portal that shows you a list of bus breakdowns and delays for that day. So here it shows you the day and date. And for the person that asked the phone number to OPT, it's on the screen right now. It's 718-392-8855 between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. And again, you can see even what the reason is and what time it got reported. So you can more or less understand, oh, my route's not here yet. Oh, it says it's stuck in traffic. Or, oh, it says they got a flat tire. They're still supposed to communicate with you, but this is just a fun tool to check out. All right, no bus, rideshare. So there is an option called rideshare that it supports families that have to maybe take a cab to school. And so it's a car service, very much like a cab, and they pick you up from your home or wherever, they take you to the school, and then they take the parent back to wherever they were going. And then they pick up the parent in the afternoon from wherever they are to school, and then from school back to the student's home. Students with disabilities who have transportation recommended on an IEP or 504, receiving curb to school transportation, or have an approved medical exception for OPT. That is the only situation that this applies to. And on your NYC account, you'll see a code in the vehicle modification section. This year it's called rideshare code. Last year it was called voucher code. The year before it was like SR. It's going to change, but it's always going to be in that section. It's always going to be in the vehicle modification section. So at least you know where to find it. The other information is not relevant to our students with IEPs, but we shared it so you have it. And then
Prima,
yes.
are we gonna try to say a little bit of that in Spanish?
No, they're doing it.
Oh,
We're
okay.
still,
I
yeah,
thought
we
got
still have,
replaced.
that's
Okay.
why I started talking faster. Yeah, so we're still getting the interpretation. And when the interpreter has to leave, we'll just continue in English and we'll schedule a part 2.
Okay. I see what I read. It was wrong. Yeah.
So the instances where you would get rideshare are route out of service. So it's called a route outage due to a driver absence. Really what that means is you don't have a driver. It's not an absence. There is just not a driver for that route, or they are out for a long time. And then you would be eligible for that situation. Delays in the route assignment. So I read that some people said they did not get their routes, or they were wondering when it comes out. If you don't have a route, by the time school starts, you're eligible for rideshare. And if your IEP accommodations are not in place, for example, if you don't have your one-to-one para or your nurse, and again, it says absence, but it really means that you don't have one assigned, because if you do have a para and they're absent for a day, you're not going to get rideshare. Are you eligible for rideshare? Yes. Do they have a mechanism to give rideshare in a day's notice? No. Last I checked, it took 72 hours. I don't know what it is now, but I just want people to understand that it's not going to solve your problem when you wake up in the morning and the power calls out or the bus is not coming. But then you could pay for a cab and then get that reimbursed, and you can submit that through the online form and put in for your reimbursement, where you pay up front and then they pay you later. Yeah, I think that was kind of the bulk of it about this, and you have the resource should you want to look more into it. And then this is like booking specifics. We're not going to go into it at all, but this is the process for this year. Again, it has changed every year since they put it out. And here is the email, right? So this is for reimbursement when you arrange it yourself. And there is the ServiceNow link as well as the email, and you'll be able to submit, and it has all the information you need. So transportation vendor name, which is usually like the name of the cab company, the details for the trip, and how much it costs. If you do an Uber, it gives you that receipt page that suffices. And reimbursement and rideshare don't cover tips. So if you want to tip them, that's out your pocket. And then reimbursements for curb to school. So students may be eligible for reimbursement, again, if their bus doesn't show up, or if it's after the date, or if you don't have a para. And then here are some more specific situations for that, which again, you have if you need. And again, tips and tax, waiting time, not covered. Travel reimbursement can be denied because your child was routed and DOE cannot verify that the bus was delayed, or if the form is not completely filled out and does not include receipts. So if you submit the form and you do everything, but you miss something, they will just say no. And they may not tell you that the form is incomplete or that you missed the receipt. They're just going to deny it. So please make sure to look this over. And eligible families can fill out the transportation reimbursement form. So I just want to make the announcement that our interpreter has left. So for the remainder, we're going to present in English, but we will still take questions in Spanish. Thank you. And then transportation to related services, as part of the IEP, are not reimbursed by OPT. Contact the CSE for assistance. And some reminders, again, we mentioned detailed receipts. You have to include it, so please save them. The reimbursement sometimes is done by mileage, not by first and, the pickup and drop off. And it's one form per day. So even if you know that you have to do it for the whole week, you still have to do one for each day. There's the link, and then this is the process. So you just follow these steps and make sure you keep a copy or take a screenshot. That is the most helpful because it'll give you a timestamp on when you submitted it originally so that you can get support should they not be able to find it. And if you're denied, right? So you could be denied for some of the following reasons, right? If you don't fall into those categories, right? Eligibility. And this is kind of the same.
I would just add that even if you're not denied, everyone is delayed. You might spend your rent money on this transportation and still be waiting. We have members, leaders in the fight for school bus rights who are waiting for $500, etc. They admitted they are behind. It was in the newspaper. So we don't consider reimbursement and rideshare as actual solutions to busing. They are Band-Aids. They are to the extent that it even works, it's not enough. So we have to keep fighting and make it so that you don't have to volunteer your labor. You don't have to donate your money to your child's transportation. It's owed to you already. Good questions. Are there any questions?
No, but I didn't make the announcement in Spanish. So disculpa que la interpretación terminé. So vamos a seguir en inglés. Disculpa, pero todavía puedo coger las preguntas en español. Y vamos a hacer segunda taller en esta misma tema para poder hacer más tiempo con la interpretación porque es mucha información y hay muchas preguntas. Gracias. So we are at the questions part, but we don't have questions. So we're going to continue. Doris, hold on. Doris, can you check if there are any questions on Facebook?
Yes, so we do have questions on Facebook, and we also have pre-registrations questions as well.
So then we're going to just take that all in Q&A. If you can go through the questions and see if any of them are similar, and then we'll take them in chunks. But we're going to continue so that we can finish the presentation. And the next question is the end of the presentation Q&A session. Thank you. All right, so contact your school when. So now we're going to talk about process escalations, complaints, support. So I'm going to read these off because this is literally like, this is what your school can help. This is when they can help. So when your bus is repeatedly late or not showing up, because they can file those complaints. If you're having problems with the current school bus, so it doesn't have to be that the bus is late. You could be having an issue with the staff. You can be having an issue where the bus is too hot. There are other issues, the no seatbelt. There may be your child could have an incident with a student on the bus, or you could be routed with a student that there's an existing issue with. And again, that's mainly for students that have behavioral classification, but it matters, right? So these are different scenarios that there could be support. If you want to file a complaint against a school bus staff member, which again, you can also do yourself by calling that OPT hotline. It's called vendor misconduct. If you want your route information, again, it's on the New York City Schools account, but if you don't have access, you still have to ask your school to give you the number so you can get access. I don't know what it's called now, but it was called the creation code. And the creation code is what you then use to create the account and link your student to it. You could create an account, but you need to link your students. And each student will have a different creation code that you get from their specific school. Contact the school if you need to request busing or make a change to the current busing. Again, there are forms for that, but you don't want to just fill it out and not tell the school. You want to let them know too. If you have a question about Metro cards, going to be Omni cards. If you need help with accommodations, if your child has a disability and you need to arrange busing for either IEP or 504 plan, and just contact your school in case you need more information. And this link helps you so it's called Find a School. And so if you don't have any information, you're going to a new school, your kid's 5 years old, you're going to high school, you can use this tool to find the information for that school so you can reach out. And again, schools open a few days before the students go in. So from Monday or Tuesday, you should be able to call and get a response. Contact your bus company when the bus is late, the bus did not come, or to make sure to verify your pickup and drop off times. So the school is not going to know your pickup and drop off time, and neither is OPT. You have to call the bus company for that. If the bus didn't come or it's late, you can call the bus company first to ask where the bus is, but you have to call OPT to actually file a complaint. The bus company is not going to do anything except give you the information for these 3 scenarios. Contact OPT, Office of People Transportation, when you want to submit a complaint against the bus company or bus staff. When you want to report a safety concern about a bus, maybe the bus is too hot, maybe the seatbelts are not working, maybe it's driving too fast. If you need help with an emergency involving a bus, although honestly, when you call, the recording says if this is an emergency, hang up and call 911. So I'm going to go with 911. If you want to report an accident involving a school bus, again, 911 and then OPT. If you have questions about transportation reimbursement, and you can also reach out to that email. And here is OPT's customer service line once again. have questions, need more help, here's who you go to. So, parents to improve school transportation, PIST NYC, Synergia. You can contact our intake line. I have another slide that you guys can screenshot that has the emails, the phone number, and everything. You can look for another parent center. So we here at Synergia are a parent center, but if you move or you have a different taste, there are parent centers everywhere, even in Puerto Rico. You can contact the Citywide Council for Special Education, known as CCSE. You can contact the Special Education Central Office at the Special Education Inbox. You can contact, if you're in District 75, then you can reach out to the D75 Council, and they also have a busing subcommittee, and this is the email ccd75 busing issues at Gmail. And then if you're not in District 75, if you're in a District 1 through 32 school, you can reach out to your Community Education Council via their school's email, and it will be CEC1@schools or CEC8 or CEC13, whatever district you live in. Just change the number. You can reach out to your school principal or transportation coordinator. Your City Council Education Committee chairperson is currently Rita Josephs, and your City Council member. That's going to be wherever you live, and you can use this link to figure out who that is. To remove student name, okay, so then you want to remove the student name and then inform the public advocate. So you have get help at advocate. Again, this is just that's for the elected public advocate of New York City, and that's citywide. So the city council people are for geographic areas. The public advocate is for the whole city, and then there's the phone number down there. And then there's at the bottom is a link from the PIST website with resources specific to bus issues.
The those emails there came from mostly the PIST link, so you don't have to copy them one by one. It's at that link.
Okay. So if you want to go to the whole link, the whole list, you can go to that link. And then we have a few more helpful contacts. So these are within the system. So we have for students with IEPs and pre-K is the Committee on Preschool Special Education, known as CPSE. For early intervention programs, it's Department of Health Early Intervention Regional Office. And then you can contact New York City Public Schools, and they have this link where then you would fill out a ticket or you can give them a call. And again, that is the OPT call center. All of these are escalation paths. They can't fix the issue. They can support in rectifying the issue. The only one that has any control over the actual issue is New York City Public Schools via OPT. If you have a child with disabilities or possible disability, they are, and you believe they were not provided with FAPE, again, free and appropriate public education, they have to provide it. And if you need transportation to get to where you can receive that the school system is obligated to make that happen. So you can always request an mediation or an impartial hearing, and there's information here about the impartial. And then, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to spell this out. The phone calls you have to do, it's terrible. You might be on hold. They might insult you. It takes time from your work, but you have to do some of these phone calls to the 718 number that's showing now and save those ticket numbers.
Incident number.
Incident numbers, right? And then that doesn't really necessarily get anything fixed, but once you have a few about the same issue and you get the school to make complaint and you might get other parents on the same route to make complaints, then is when all of these emails can help you either compose an email to the right folks at OPT, or you write to who you need to write to. And when you do CC PIS, then you do CC, you copying, they know that lawyers and elected parent leaders and people who know people in the newspapers and TV are watching what they do to respond to your child's needs. So it's unfortunate that it takes all of that to get something you were promised and paid your taxes for. But we want everyone to know that you be prepared to do that kind of thing if you want them to take it seriously. I just wanted to add one. I think it's not here. It might be mentioned in the para resource link that related service at schools.nyc.gov is someplace to also contact if there's no para assigned.
So any additional links that might not be in here, if you email them to me, I can include them in the email to the attendees with the PowerPoint afterwards.
Great.
Thank you. All right, more contacts and support. Because if you didn't have enough, there's more. So there's committees on special education, which I should have put CSE. That's what the CSE stands for. CPSE is preschool. This is school age. Early intervention regional office. Early intervention bus companies, and then pre-K bus companies. They are different. Different bus companies hold different contracts, and then school age bus companies. So you'll be able to see the list there, and it should have contact information. I can't promise it's accurate, but you will get the right company, and then maybe they'll give you the right number. But we're giving you everything that we've been able to compile over time, and it's useful for many reasons. So still no bus? Escalations and support, further escalations. So you can contact the superintendent's office or the district office, sometimes it's referred to. And here are two links that you can, there's a Google directory, but then there's also the leadership link. And both of these have different information for different people in the schools. So you may be able to get the superintendent and other information as well. New York City Public Schools Central Office, again, the inbox, we call it the special education inbox. And then you can also contact them at 718-935-2007. Then there's mediation, which is an official escalation path, but it's the lesser of the two. And then I'm not going to explain what each is. That's a different presentation, but we do have recordings on our YouTube that will tell you everything about mediation and impartial hearings. And we have the links available as well. One we don't hear a lot about is the UFT special education complaint. It's something that we've been using for a couple of years now, and it's been really effective. So you're able to file a complaint here for all of the same things that we're already filing complaints for, but just you can go to this link. And then a state complaint. So that would be the New York State Education Department, and you can file a complaint directly with them. Although I want to be clear, when you file a state complaint, they're going to want to know everything you've done before you filed that complaint and who you spoke to. And so they're going to go through that process. So don't jump straight to the state complaint. Transportation reminders. I'm going to let you take this, Sarah.
Okay. We've been talking about NYCSA, the New York City Schools account, and some people in the chat asked, where should I find the route information? If you're able to set that up as soon as possible with the school giving you a code and directing you to step-by-step video actually that they have on the DOE website about doing that, you will see where you'll see the company, and you will also see certain codes. We've had some questions where people are seeing the rideshare code and thinking, oh my God, does this mean I do not have a route? It does not necessarily mean that. It just means hang on to it in case of contingency. If you change your address, you have to actually do that through the school. It's not so easy. But if you change something like your phone number, check always that the school, the home, and the bus company and OPT all have the same information. This may show up on another slide, but they can give you a lot of heartache if they have a bus, but it takes your kid to the wrong school. Or, they think that the school starts at 8 and it starts at 8:45. So check the details and keep yourself connected in that way to be the first to know if they try to change anything for you. It will not come through the mail and you might not get a phone call. If things might just happen and they have placed it on Nixa, assuming you will look and find out for yourself. I think that's it. Some of these are repeats, but they link you to those list of bus company phone numbers as well. Next.
All right, tips and tricks. So we have some tips and tricks. This slide was transparent when we started. Now it's not, but I will read it and I'll clear it up when I send it in the deck. But just some tips and tricks on like what you can do, right? So tips for contacting bus vendors. Call very early in the morning. Very early, like 5 a.m. early, because they're there.
Let it ring.
And let it ring, because someone will eventually pick up because they are there. They're picking up buses from 4:30 in the morning sometimes, because some routes start at 6:30 and you may have a bus depot in Brooklyn and their first pickup is in the Bronx. So they are absolutely there early in the morning. They may be open extra hours before school starts, right? Including Labor Day weekend. So we are in Labor Day weekend right now. It's a great time to call the bus companies to find out information. They're open and they're calling us. So call them should you need that.
Rima, they are allowed to give you your route info, whereas the OPT customer service will say it's confidential.
Exactly. So remember that your school may not have this information and OPT can't give it to you, but the bus company has it and can give it to you. So this is where you want to start when you're looking for your route information. If it's not on your Nixa account or if you don't have access to your Nixa account. Again, your school might be able to tell you the route number and that's it. And then you call the company and you ask them for your pickup time or for other information. When does the route start? But the school tends to only have the route number and who's on it.
We've also had people call the bus staff from the year before, matron or driver, and actually some of the routes are rolling over, especially general education, because they weren't made in time by OPT for the companies to reassign them. So sometimes you get lucky and you have the same folks and they'll pick up the phone and say, "Oh, hi, Mrs. So-and-so," and they'll let you know. Rima, I do see a hand, but I think
Yeah, I put it down. We're gonna take the questions in the Q&A. So if you can please share your question there. Vamos a poner las preguntas del Q&A. So por favor, úsala ahí. O la charla en Facebook. Okay. So one company has its own online form for issues, which is Nice Bus or New York City School Bus Umbrella Company. And the link is included there for you. If the number is wrong, ask in parent groups. You can also ask them, right? Like I said, you may call the base in Brooklyn and you need the one in Queens. Just call and ask or ask parents because many people have gone through this already, sometimes storing the numbers in their phone. So it's word of mouth is wholly underrated, but is everything in advocacy. Ensure emergency contact information is up to date with your school and that your bus card is filled out and that it's correct. So make sure you look at those numbers and make sure that your 2 doesn't look like a 7. Immediately update your school with any address changes or changes to living arrangements. Again, some people, they may come into financial hardship, lose an apartment, and they start staying with some family member for a short time. You would be considered a family in temporary or transitional housing, and you would be eligible for those STH supports that the schools receive. So please always communicate with your school. And then know your bus stop and arrive a few minutes before the scheduled time. The bus will not wait more than a few minutes, even though it only has to wait 1 minute, and you will find people that only wait 1 minute, and they must continue. So yes, if you could please come out a few minutes before, whether it's a route or it's your house, just so to keep the route time down and to support your staff. Grace on the first week of school, it's going to be tough. All right. Yeah, see, we were giving you all the tips and tricks. All right. Problems with the school bus route. So this is another resource from PIST, and you'll have it here if you want to screenshot it if you're on Facebook really quickly. And then there's a QR code up here in the top. And in Spanish, I'll give you another minute. Esto es un recurso de PIST. Puede tirar un retrato. Hay un código de QR aquí arriba. And then these are more resources, even more, right? So the transportation guide, English and Spanish, the impartial hearings process. Some of these links sound like duplicates, but they're not. Some of them are the actual link to do the process, and some of them are the links to learn about the process. And then we have one for summer school and weather emergencies. And then more resources here. We discussed many of these throughout, but just wanted to put them all on one page. So here we have the school bus emergency contact card. This is the form that they're supposed to give you off the bus on the first day of school, where you put who your child can get off the bus with and if they can be let off the bus unaccompanied or not. And then the change of PM drop-off, this is the document that you fill out if you need an alternate afternoon location. And then again, school search, you can search here. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, it's fine. Just that the bus contact we sent, it's not like a perfect PDF, and not everybody has the means to go printing that and printing several. But you can just write it on paper. You can write it on a card and make it, keep for yourself. Oh yeah, this is what I told them, and be ready in case there's reshuffling of the routes, which for some companies is going to happen possibly as early as like Halloween. Have two. You can have an extra, have a spare. That's my advice. That's it.
Thank you. Q&A. So question and answer session. We'll now take questions. I know that we took a whole lot of questions throughout, so we don't have Q&A here, but I'd like to ask my colleague Doris if she can give us the pre-registration questions and the questions from Facebook.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to start with the Facebook questions. So the first question is, which I believe you did answer already, is what is a rideshare code?
Mhm.
So the rideshare code is the code that they need to process payment. So when you book a rideshare, you put the code in, and that's how you proceed with the process. You can't book without the code.
Next question, if transportation does not contact you the first day of school, how do you find out at what time you are expected to come down and pick up your child?
Can I take that?
Go ahead.
Okay. So try to call the school this week and also call them. The staff comes back Tuesday and Wednesday. So try to find out before Thursday, because you know those phones everywhere will be very occupied. But whatever you can find in the school account, it's going to say an early time because they will only show you at this point when the route begins. So your child might be first pickup, your child might be 8, 10, 5, 3. Until you know the route, they call it sometimes the sequence number for your student, you kind of have to act like we might be first. And unfortunately, with everything going on in your child's nervous system on the first day of school, you either want to be there early and be very patient and have some way to entertain the child, or you want to just say, okay, today I'm going to work late and I'm just going to take my kid so that we don't have to have the stress. I mean, that's, the informal suggestion. That's not official, but it can be really tricky, especially for a kindergarten kid, making that impression, starting a new program. If you don't want them to have to think about remembering standing there waiting and saying, where's my bus? You might want to do your plan A and B if possible. But to avoid that, please feel free to be calling your school. I'm speaking of public school. I can't speak to other places, but hopefully between email and group chats and phone, there's someone you can reach who can point you in the right direction. But yeah, flexibility, which is really hard for our kids, is kind of necessary in that beginning part of school. And I'm getting, flashbacks, so I'll stop.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question. Who determines the LTT for each student?
So LTT is limited travel time. And again, that should be determined by the doctor. So your doctor, your physician that sees your child, that fills that form out, is going to make a recommendation. But then remember, it has to get approved by Office of School Health. So their doctors are then going to in turn look at the recommendation and see what is feasible and appropriate, air quotes, for that child within the recommendation from that physician. Again, when a student, it clearly needs something, there's not always a lot of pushback. But if it's not very clear, then you may end up in this gray area where the doctor says 45 minutes and the school says an hour, right? And that's a best case scenario. So, within 15 minutes of your ask is not terrible. Just want to be honest about that. It's not any one person that determines this. This is why it's an individualized document, because it really depends on the student. If there are situations that justify whatever accommodation, as long as it can be justified and it's covered in IDEA federal law, or it can be interpreted to be covered in,
Or
you have to
504.
provide it, or in
Mhm.
504, exactly. So sometimes it's not covered in IDEA, but it may be covered in section 504. So you may have a student that has an IEP and a 504. Not common, but it does happen.
I would say be prepared. They, like many other benefits, sometimes the first answer is no, and then you have to reapply, appeal, and see what can happen and mediate or informal hearing. Meanwhile, your kid is on a long ride, and we will ask you to be public about that to the extent that you can. There's a social media campaign, hashtag Where's My Bus. If your child likes to show off on the camera, get them saying, "Where's my bus?" It's 8:27 and school started at 8. And what we're doing is taking those and directing them to people in Washington, actually, who consider have been asked formally to investigate bus discrimination here in New York.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah.
Mhm.
Hold on. I just want to say the most important thing that she said was if they say no, try again. Same thing with Social Security, free advice. Go ahead.
Next question. How many minutes is a bus considered a no-show bus?
There are no minutes. If it shows up, it showed up. And they're going to corroborate that with the GPS. And so I've personally been in that situation where, hey, the bus is not coming. It's 8 o'clock. School starts at 8 o'clock. I'm taking my kid to school. Bus shows up at 8:50. Oh, we're at school. It unfortunately it's a thing. But what you can do then, it's a different complaint name, right? So it's not that you can't, it's just different. So it goes from being a no-show to a late bus, right? And then there's different violations within late. So there's late pickup where they missed the pickup time, but they're not late to school. Then there's late to school where so one violation is late pickup. You can separately file the late to school if they got there after school started. That one, they may tell you can't file, but if the bus came after school started, you can file it because they didn't come. So we're living in gray now. There's a lot of gray here.
So not the number of minutes, but how far beyond the beginning of the school day.
Exactly. So that's the answer then. The answer is that once the school day starts, the bus is not there.
It's a no-show.
Exactly.
Good.
Thank you, Rima. Next question. My child was approved for 30 minutes limited time travel. How do I know this was factored into his routine?
Well, if your kid is getting picked up at 7:35, call school at 8 o'clock and ask where they are. I literally, like that's how you make sure. So, personal situation, right? When I have a student that's also approved for limited time, and the first week of school, I call to verify what time did they get there. If you have a para, you can tell the para to do a check-in. Again, they don't have to give you their phone number. They don't have to any of that, but you can ask them when they pick up, if you can please let me know the time that you arrived at school and the time you left school, and let me know when you get back. So you're not asking for a text message or any extra work other than when you get off the bus, can you just verbally tell me this information? There's also, we're gonna have to add this to the presentation. There's the New York City school bus app, and the school bus app is not perfect. It's in the beta version, so it's like it's not even an official version yet, but it does track the bus. And you do need the New York City Schools account to log in. There is no way of logging in without it. But that will also show you from the time that your driver turns the GPS on where they are, so you can see when the bus route starts, because it's going to show you that the route started. And then you can see more or less where they are, and that can kind of give you an idea. Now, the end of the day, if school ends at 2:50, you still have to check, because sometimes they'll do busing earlier. So instead of 2:50, they'll do busing at 2:30. So you can't think that if my student gets home at 3:30, they got out at 3, they made the half an hour. You have to find out what time they actually left the school. And again, you have to call the school, maybe you have to talk to the teacher, written communication notebook, but you have to find a way of documenting, because if it's not documented, it's not real. It has to be written. So you get that information and then you put it in writing, and now you can use that, because if it's an accommodation on the IEP, it is a federal law of violation of federal law if they don't comply with it. So I just want to like keep, if nobody learned anything today, I need you to leave with busing is a related service covered under federal law. If
It's-
anything is wrong with busing, it is a violation of IDEA. That's all I need you to remember, because that is your path to fix whatever is wrong for your child.
In case the question was, how do I show that it's reflected on paper? The parent would also need to, I'm not sure, it's a certain code and they might have the code or they might spell it out.
It'll say both. It usually says,
Mhm.
if you go on NYCSA, I think it says LTT and then spells it out. If you go directly to the IEP, I think it's just spelled out.
But the number of minutes don't always
Yes.
show on the IEP.
So then so my recommendation in that situation is to talk to your teacher and tell them to add it. Tell them I want it in the IEP.
Manually,
Yep,
somewhere in
to
the.
go into the
Mhm.
system and manually add the minutes.
Mhm.
Not written, not real, guys.
Mhm.
Thank you. So moving on to the pre-registration questions. How can I secure a paraprofessional to ride with my child on the bus?
That
But
gets touched on in the app that we have. That's kind of a long answer, and maybe that person can get an email back.
yeah, so I was gonna mention the same thing. And there is in the page that says the accommodations next to paraprofessional, there's a link for the resource. The short answer is that because the IEP is an individualized thing, the answer changes from student to student, and it's really specific to your individual situation. But if you need support with this, you can contact us here at Synergy at the Parent Center. The next slide, I'm going to show the intake information. You can contact us for support with that, and then we can have our special education advocate go through your individual situation so they can figure out what part of your situation may or may not make you eligible. Any more questions, Doris?
Oh, yes, sorry. I did include the intake information recently on the chat. And yes, the
Thank
next
you.
question is, who can I call when my child's bus is breaking down, which happens often?
So that question, I like that question. If your child's bus is breaking down often, so first answer, you call OPT. You call the bus company and you call OPT. For me, I call OPT first and then the bus company because I want my complaint filed and I want my incident number before I speak to the bus company. And then call the bus company. Now, if you have constant breakdowns, that's when I use that website about the bus delays and I go check if they reported this breakdown. Because if they didn't, then I'm going to call OPT and file a vendor misconduct because now they're just late. They're just late. Or there really is a mechanical issue with the bus and they're going to route the complaint appropriately. So let's say I complain because they have constant breakdowns. When I file the complaint, it's going to go to somebody who's going to come and evaluate the bus. It's going to go to their engineers and they're going to come look at the bus and say, oh, there is a problem with this bus. And that's how you get these problem buses replaced. Same thing with like AC issues or heat issues. It's the same kind of thing. That is a breakdown. That is something that's not functioning. So your bus company, OPT, and then if you don't get anywhere with that, all of the escalation paths that we discussed, including contacting the parent center and contacting PIST, who can both support you with trying to get a resolution. And I also want to mention, thank you, Doris. She just shared the survey link in the chat. We really appreciate it if you guys can fill out our survey. It helps us let us know if we're doing a good job and what you'd like to, what would you like to see more of? So if you could take a minute while we continue with the Q&A to please fill out the survey, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. So the next question is, what should I take into account for this new stage of my child's life?
I'm
Say
muted.
something about that.
I'm
No,
not.
I love that question. We have done some attempts at writing a social story to actually, it's more specific. There do exist in the universe, if you search, some stories for children about taking the school bus. But we specifically worked on a visual version and a picture fill in the blanks to with your child's name version of how to cope when it changes, like you used to have this driver and matron and now you have this other driver and matron, what's going on. So those are some things, but I think parents should get themselves involved with groups, whether it's in the here, whether it's Facebook groups, and find your community that is going through it with you or has gone through it. I did share at one point in the chat, PIST has a Facebook group, and it's followed by not only parents but also experienced bus personnel and some educators and paras. We did have a para once give us, there's a para group where they share job openings. So if you communicate through us to her, she will post, it's in Bay Ridge and it's going to Washington Heights and it's blah, 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 and you might find a para that way. But also for in order to support your child, please support yourself, and please let their other teachers and therapists at school know that there's a big adjustment they may be going through with riding the school bus. It's a social thing, it's sensory thing. And then when these problems happen, it can be stressful. It can be hot in the summer, cold in the winter, etc. So yes, um, have grace with yourself and look for support.
Thank you, Sarah. So we have 3 more questions left. How and who can I request transportation from? I believe you answered this already.
Yeah, we did, and there's a slide on it. Oh, they're not gonna. If you So for Facebook, was that Facebook or was that pre-registration?
Pre-registration.
We'll pull the email on that one and we'll see if we can respond directly.
Thank you. Next question. When is the best time to request transportation for the following year?
Me and you look the same, Sarah. That's a good question.
Because they are deadlines. Yeah, no, there's deadlines for summer school and then there's deadline in the summer for fall. And they had a cutoff, as we mentioned, of August 15th, and sometimes there's cutoffs of July 22nd, and you don't necessarily know everything in your placement. Just
But
do
what
everything earlier than you think.
we covered this in our last presentation about placement. Their date is not August 15th. August 15th is a federal deadline from the Jose P case, who used to be a Synergia client, that they have to get all placement done by August 15th. You're not going to find on paper that it says that the busing has to be done, but with the 2-week rule, there's no way to get the busing done if it's not in by August 15th. But that's a federal deadline. And I want to say that it's June 15th for kindergarten. Or if you're going to a new school. But just so that everyone understands, there are these very vague deadlines that get thrown around, and then there are these federal deadlines that once we pass this, then there's a whole different set of escalation and things that you qualify for. And you can check on our Facebook page for our placement presentation from 2 weeks ago if you want more information on that.
Thank you, Rima. Next question. What other forms of transportation can be secured or allocated for my child?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
I just want to mention travel training as just something to think about. As if your child, appears to be going in the direction by a certain age of more independent travel, and there is a documentation about that from the Office of Travel Training on also the pistnyc.org resources page. Your child does not have to take the yellow bus if they don't need it, and it's not happening automatically anyway. So if you just live that distance from that school and are in that grade, your kid can get the Metro card, which is now going to be a every day, 4 times a day, 24 hours opportunity to ride and go to wonderful places in New York or just to see family or get enrichment activities done. And that's something that you won't get as easily with the yellow bus. So maybe you want to skip this whole thing and do that, but you have to weigh the pros and cons for your own family.
Thank
And
you,
I- and
Sam.
I thank you for bringing that up. So YAI did a really amazing travel training 2-part presentation for us last year, which we may still have on our Facebook. We do have deadlines that when we have to take it down by for them, but we also have upcoming travel training workshops with them. So check out our Facebook and YouTube, see what you can find there. And stay tuned, check out our events calendar and your emails so that you can get the information for the next travel training workshop.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rima. That is the rest of our questions. No more questions on Facebook or the Q&A. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation on Where's My Bus, NYC Student Transportation. Special thanks to our presenters for leading this webinar on such a great, important topic. And as Rima mentioned earlier, please, we encourage you to complete our survey. We would truly appreciate if you took the time to complete it. If anyone has any other questions that they would like to share with our presenters directly, please let us know and we will get it to you guys via email. For those joining us via Facebook, to secure a copy of the materials from today's webinar, please contact our intake line. This presentation will also be posted on YouTube. Thank you again to everyone that joined us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again to the presenters.